Spinning globe, 666, and the strong delusion. Who sends the strong delusion? God does. Why? Go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The coming of the lawless one, the beast, the Antichrist, will be, and it's interesting that he's called the lawless one too, isn't it? Sheila's always like, if we're not supposed to be keeping the Torah, why does God make a big deal out of a lawless one? And all of our holidays, quote unquote, beast feasts, go back to this guy. December 25th, dying and resurrecting sun god of antiquity, all that stuff goes back to this guy. The lawless one. The people who are doing the Christmas and Easter, Xmas and Ishtar Day, are the same people typically that are arguing against what we're talking about here this weekend. Well, that all goes back to the lawless one. The coming of the lawless one will be accompanied by the power of Satan. He will use every kind of power, including miraculous signs, lying wonders. Ooh, look at the Hubble pictures from the space telescope. And every type of evil to deceive those who are dying, those who refuse to love the truth that would save them. For this reason, for the reason of people not wanting to believe the truth, it says God will send them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie. Then all who have not believed the truth, but have taken pleasure in unrighteousness, will be condemned. So much of the globe model, and I'm going to show you this to you in a minute, points to the number 666 over and over and over again. This is about the lawless one, whose number is 666. Lots of signs and lying wonders, I believe, come from NASA on a regular basis. But by way of review, let's just go back and see what the scriptures have to say. And since I'm the village idiot, I'll let Dr. Michael Heiser start this off.
Proverbs 8, when he established the heavens, I was there when he drew a circle on the face of the deep. Circular. He made firm the skies above, so on and so forth. Here's an interesting one. He has inscribed a circle on the face of the waters at the boundary between light and darkness.
How do you inscribe an orbit? Hold that thought. Let that one bounce around in your noodle for a while. We'll come back to it. When you consider the numerous scriptures that reference the heavenly luminaries in motion, and combine it with the many scriptures that describe the earth as being set on a firm foundation of pillars, fixed and not moving, plus the fact that Isaiah's circle was inscribed, if we were to employ the principle of Occam's razor, clearly the position that requires the fewest assumptions is that of the circular, still flat earth. Everything else is wishful thinking at best. And that wishful thinking requires constant mental gymnastics, as we will see over the course of this series, in order to justify the spinning heliocentric globular earth mentality. And once again, let's go to Bible.cc, shall we? And look at Isaiah 40:22. And I'm using this function right here. You can also use the parallel function right here for English. These are all the English Bible translations. Okay. New International, circle of the earth. New Living Translation, circle of the earth. English Standard, circle of the earth. New American Standard, circle of the earth. King James, circle of the earth. Holman Christian Standard, circle of the earth. International, he who sits on the disk of the earth. Net Bible, oh, that's interesting. They come up with horizon, which is not what the word hug means. New Heart English Bible, he who sits above the circle of the earth. God's Word Translation, enthroned above the earth. They just throw the word out all together, I guess. JPS Tanakh, 1917, circle of the earth. That's Jewish. That's the Jewish guys right there. They, might know their own language. Call me crazy. Call me crazy. I know that's insane for me to suggest such a thing. But these Jewish scholars who took their own Hebrew scriptures and turned it into their English version, the JPS Tanakh Bible, they said circle of the earth. They didn't say reeling, rocking, rolling, orbiting, spinning, globe, sphere, earth. They said circle of the earth. New American Standard, vault of the earth. That's interesting. They threw the word vault in there. Jubilee Bible 2000, circle of the earth. King James 2000, circle of the earth. American King James, circle of the earth. American Standard Version, circle of the earth. Dewey Rhymes Bible, upon the globe of the earth. Oh, that's interesting. Dewey Rhymes. Oh, that would be following on the heels of the Copernican revolution, so that doesn't really surprise me, especially since this is a Catholic Bible.
Copernicus' theory of a heliocentric universe was well known at the upper strata of the Catholic Church in his lifetime. While he preferred his theories published after his death, he ultimately agreed to publish his manuscripts on the persistent appeals of high church officials. The necessity to change public conception from an accurate belief in a flat, enclosed Earth to a false belief grew slowly. With sapient baby steps, the whole world would become amenable to the final delusion of an alien invasion under the first woe. The Catholic hierarchy had the perfect opportunity to lay groundwork for a global deception to culminate in this Earth's final generation. This deception required a globe Earth spinning throughout the vast reaches of space, space inhabited by aliens and other sentient life forms. These contrivances created doubt in the Bible, putting science ahead of Scripture, which advises mankind the Earth is enclosed and unmoving. They also place the Creator far away from His creation by presenting a universe unimaginably vast. To engineer this transformation in belief, the newly created Society of Jesus, commonly known as the Jesuits, became the agents of change. Following Copernicus' publications, it is probable the Jesuit order has produced more astronomers than any other demographic in Europe. That, ostensibly, a religious order should produce so many scientists should cause surprise. However, as these scientists have focused nearly exclusively in but one area, this gives us reason to question. Upon rejection of the sacred scriptures, which teach us Earth is a fixed, immovable object under a protective covering, a nefarious foundation was laid. Atop this were built perversions designed to force humanity to doubt the very word of our Father Yahuwah. With the biblical geocentric model rejected, a new explanation was required. A globe Earth, its orbit of the Sun for millions of miles every year, illimitable realms of space with billions of galaxies, each composed of billions of stars with worlds innumerable. All this became necessary to explain the new heliocentric model of the universe, and mankind, over a short time, lost his divine significance. Thereafter was created an environment within which the writings of Charles Darwin found a receptive audience. Once science showed the Bible wrong, the disparager then diverged from her religious guise altogether. Anything suddenly became possible. There was nothing above question, including how the Earth seemed to appear in the vastness of space with all else, and the existence of extraterrestrials. The Big Bang Theory is, today, the leading explanation about how the universe began. At its simplest, it talks about the universe as we know it, starting with a small singularity, then inflating over the next 13.8 billion years to the cosmos that we know today. Priest Andrew Pinsent holds advanced degrees in theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, as well as a doctorate in particle physics from Oxford. In January 2015, he wrote, "Being both a priest and a former particle physicist at CERN, I am often asked to give talks on faith and science. Quite often, young people ask me the following question: how can you be a priest and believe in the Big Bang? To which I am delighted to respond, we invented it. Or more precisely, priest Georges Lemaitre invented the theory that is today called the Big Bang, and everyone should know about him." The author of the Big Bang Theory was none other than the Jesuit-trained priest Georges Lemaitre. Follow from cause to effect. 1. Without a globe Earth circling the Sun through the far reaches of space, we do not have the Big Bang. 2. Without the Big Bang, we do not have evolution. 3. Without evolution, we are more likely to accept creation as an act of intelligent design by a divine creator. The Roman Catholic Church does, in fact, accept evolution.
So that's interesting. Darby translation, Circle of the Earth. English Revised Version, Circle of the Earth. Webster, Circle of the Earth. Captain Definition Man himself. Circle. World English Bible. Circle of the earth. Young's literal translation. Literal translation. Circle of the earth. Okay, now let's get really crazy. Let's go ahead and click on multi. And go past the English. Check for yourself. Check multiple languages. Okay? They're all saying the same thing. And they're not saying anything about reeling and orbiting and rotating. Going in a circle, as in motion. They're describing a noun, a shape, circle, not sphere. None of these guys, except for Dewey Rhymes, came up with anything even remotely indicating a sphere here. Not one of them gave us any indication that Isaiah meant to say that the earth is spherical or revolving, reeling, orbiting, or in any other form of movement. Rather, they all indicated the simple, straightforward, circular nature of our world in the mind of the Holy Spirit-inspired authors of Scripture. Period. And while Dr. Michael Heiser may not agree with this personally himself, he doesn't believe the earth is circle, he believes the earth is a sphere, he at least has the intellectual honesty, the integrity to show what the biblical authors meant. And they didn't mean globe.
That's part of a video series I did called Theologians Gone Wild. In response to several guys out there that were saying, well, circle means it's talking about the orbit of the earth. And you know, anyway, that's all part of that. I'm not saying it is the strong delusion. I'm asking if it is. It's a pretty good candidate when you go through it. I just did a search the other day on my phone. I was just sitting there. What is the speed of this alleged orbit? Because I keep hearing this all the time. Well, no, circle. He's talking about that's the circle of the orbit of the Earth. That's what that whole video was in response to. And I'm like, okay, what is the speed of the Earth going around the sun, supposedly? And it's cleverly disguised as 18.5 miles per second when you search for it. 18.5 miles per second. So I'm like, 18.5 times 60 seconds times 60 minutes, 66,600 miles per hour. Interesting. Supposedly, this globe that we're on is 25,000 miles in circumference, which amounts to 8 inches per mile squared is the math. 8 inches, of course, being 0.666 of a foot. 10 miles being 66.666 feet. 100 being, you know, you're getting to see a pattern here. The tilt of the Earth, I looked that up. Okay, the tilt of the Earth, 23.5 degrees, 23.4, depending on who you read. The sources that I looked at were government sources. They were saying 23.4. 23.4 off of center. If you have a 90-degree angle, 90 subtract 23.4, 66.6. It's probably all just a coincidence. Maybe. Maybe it is. This other guy who believes in the globe, I know I'm crazy. I'm crazy. I told you, you know, don't believe me. Remember the slide with the tinfoil hat? Or let's just say things that make you go, This other guy who believes in the globe, it created this graphic, and I saw it on his website, godtype.com, and he was saying all of these distances in nautical miles from various points of on Antarctica to the Jerusalem, to the Vatican obelisk, to Washington, are 6,660 nautical miles. I'm like, okay, whatever. Godtype.com. It's up in the top corner there. You know, he believes in the globe, and the tap dance he does around this to say that, you know, that's whatever. I'm like, okay, dude, yeah, sure. The number of the beast is 666. So, you know, most of us, the understanding we have of our globe comes from this organization right here, or organizations affiliated with them, or organizations that promote their work, like the picture you've seen in every one of your textbooks from Apollo 17. Should we trust this organization? I didn't put all the slides in here that I wanted to. I had to cut it down for time. But I mean, just look into Jack Parsons, JPL. He's the founder of Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That dude was a hardcore Satanist occultist. He was the disciple of Aleister Crowley. You guys know who he is? Who fashioned himself as the beast. He referred to himself as the beast. And Parsons was his disciple next to, who's the heir apparent. And he gets out there in the area that became known as Area 51. He's working together with L. Ron Hubbard, another freak that creates a cult called Scientology. They're out there doing ceremonial sex magic rituals out there to try to bring about the spirit of Babylon. That's what leads into NASA. And then when you get to the formation of NASA, you got more than 100 or 1,600 Nazis escaped the judgment that they deserved and found refuge in America. A group of 104 German rocket scientists, including Werner von Braun, Ludwig Roth, Arthur Rudolph, are pictured here at Fort Bliss, Texas in 1946. Many had worked to develop the V-2 rocket at Peenemünde, Germany, and came to the United States after World War II, subsequently working on various rockets, including the Explorer 1 space rocket and, of course, the Saturn V rocket at NASA. These are the people who founded NASA, and then they put Freemasons in charge of the whole thing. You look at the heads of NASA that were like 32nd, 33-degree Masons, and then why is it that all of our astronauts have to be Freemasons or associated with Freemasons or have parents that were Freemasons or be in the military? That's the foundation of the organization that so many are putting so much trust in. What does the scripture say about the commandments, right? First one, thou shalt have no other gods before me. So what do? All of their missions are named after gods. Mercury, right? You got Gemini, you follow that. You know, the Gemini missions. And then, of course, we have Apollo. It's interesting that only 6 missions allegedly made it to the moon, with 2 men walking on the moon. 6 times 2 is 12. So we have the 12 apostles of Apollo are the ones spreading the message that here's a picture of Earth from the moon. When you look into Apollo, specifically those that claim to land on the moon, I could spend an entire weekend going through that stuff. But there are a lot of resources that you can look into, one of them being aulis.com, A-U-L-I-S. These are PhD level people going through the footage, going through, looking at the pictures, looking at stuff, and just shredding the Apollo missions. I was invited to speak in Amsterdam several months back, almost a year ago now, I think. I can't remember when it was exactly, but a high-profile musician, let's just say, started looking at some of my materials on Flat Earth. As a result, he started looking into the Torah. As a result, he started attending my virtual house church. Now, this is a guy that's really up there in the hip hop genre, you know, which is like so opposite, like who I am. You know, I'm the white guy, can't, you know, dance or, you know, do anything. So this other rapper, B.O.B., I think was his name, started becoming vocal about Flat Earth. And so, you know, this guy that I'm not going to mention his name, but he saw what that guy was looking into. He's like, what is this? You know, so he looked in that, and then he stumbled on my stuff, stumbled on Torah, started studying the Torah, started attending my virtual house church, then realized he needed to get saved, got saved. And then they said, well, if I'm going to get baptized, I'm going to do it right. So he got on a plane and flew to Israel and got baptized in the Jordan River. And he told me, you know, I'm sitting in this very expensive car, you know, with Sheila, going, how does this happen? You know, he goes, I kid you not. I said, I came up out of being baptized, and he said the only word I got was bring Rob Skiba to Amsterdam. I'm like, okay. So, and that was just so, God has got such a crazy sense of humor. I'm giving this presentation in a venue called the Milky Way. All right. Now, the Milky Way venue had multiple different stages where concerts were taking place, like 5 different concerts taking place. And if you could have seen the marquee, right? Like the marquee is like all these yo-yo hip hop, you know, dudes, and there's like my goofy picture from Ski. So I'm in this place, you know, I'm talking like this stuff. And it was pretty soundproof, so you know, we couldn't hear what was outside and stuff. But every time they open the doors, like all this pot smoke comes in, and like all this music, and I'm like, what in the how does this happen? But I'm like, okay, God, whatever, you know. He called me specifically to talk about the stuff that I've been talking about this weekend, so that's what I did. And the crazy thing was, he got booked on a Tonight Show kind of thing that night, that he's under contract with record labels and stuff, and he had to do that. So he couldn't even attend the conference that he paid for Sheila and I to go to, but a whole lot of other people did. And it was really interesting because I had known about this, that the moon rocks were first exposed as frauds by them in the Netherlands. Now, the Apollo astronauts went around and the big publicity tour at the time, back in the 60s, giving various people in positions of royalty and whatnot, leadership, moon rocks. Well, they decided at one point they wanted to take an insurance policy out on it. So, of course, as part of doing the insurance policy thing, they start analyzing it, and they found out the thing's petrified wood. Now, I'm at this venue, the Milky Way, and I find out that this museum is literally like a couple of blocks down the road. So I'm going to go there. So Sheila and I went there, and we get to the information desk, and they weren't even aware that they had the thing. I'm like, this is supposed to be one of the most significant achievements of all of humanity. You would think you'd have that center display with, you know, like a halo right over it, and the angels floating over it, pointing at it. Like, look at what we did, you know? No. They had it tucked away in a warehouse somewhere, like in Indiana Jones, you know? They said that. It's tucked away in a warehouse. You have to get special appointment and blah, blah, blah. You know, she had to actually look it up that they had it. But I just thought it was rather poetic that here I'm, you know, the whole series of events that led me there, what I was talking about, and that was right down the street. They exposed it as a fraud. And just so happened, if you go look it up, that Wernher von Braun and company were down in Antarctica in the late 1960s, prior to us allegedly going there in '69, looking for moon rocks. You can look that up for yourself. Going to Antarctica, looking for moon rocks. So first of all, at that point, we hadn't even been there yet. So how do you know if you find a rock that it's from the moon? It's not like you go, oh, made on the moon. Cool. All right, let's categorize that one. Oh, this one's made on Mars. Put that one over here. There's no way you're going to know that. And we're allegedly in the space race against the Russians, right? We got to beat the Russians. They're going, Sputnik, right? So if we're in this big space race against the Russians, and we got to get to space and get up there, and, you know, Gary or whatever is floating around up there, oh, we got to walk in space. Why are you down on a vacation in Antarctica? Very suspicious. I show this picture a lot of times to people and say, hey, this is associated with the Apollo moon landings. You know, can you tell me what region of the moon that is? People give various guesses. Some of you have probably seen it, so you know where I'm going with this. Well, it's not the moon. That's Arizona. It's where they, Cinder Lake, Arizona, where they blew up Arizona to look like the moon. In fact, you can still see remnants of it on Google Earth today. I recently went there because I had already done all the presentations, and I was in Arizona not too long ago. I'm like, I'm going there. And if you saw the video I posted on YouTube, it's called Rob Skiba Walks on the Moon. I shot a little selfie of myself, you know, there. Maybe that's why, you know, you had the before and after. You know, before, these guys were like, ooh, yeah, ooh. And then when you have the press conference, when they come back, allegedly coming back from the most significant thing human beings have ever done, ever, that's the way they looked. And if you watch the actual presentation, they don't, look, man, if I was on the moon, if I had ever walked on the moon, I'd still be floating when I came back here. You'd have to like tie a tether to me. So I didn't fly away because I'd be spazzed. You know, I'm pretty hyper anyway. I'd be spazzed, jacked out of my mind for the rest of my life. These guys look like their dog was shot. They just found out Santa Claus isn't real. The Easter Bunny, you know. They were so, like, to me, honestly, they looked like good patriotic men that hated the fact that they had to lie. That's, I'm maybe reading too much into it. Fair enough. But watch it for yourself and see what you think. But so if that stuff didn't happen, then neither did this. This is Apollo 17 that allegedly took this picture. And that's the only picture we've had until we get into much later. That was in 1972. We have all these pictures put out by NASA. You know, which one is it? You know, they're always different. And if you look at these, a lot of these, they'll tell you right off the bat, especially the 2002 one, the most famous one. This is a composite. It's created in Photoshop. The one in 2002 right there, I went through that with a fine-tooth comb, if so to speak, in Photoshop and showed you where they're using the Photoshop clone tool to replicate clouds all over the place. It's manufactured. That same, they redid the old Star Trek episodes, the 1960 ones. They had all, you know, cheesy special effects because they had basically the catering budget of today's TV shows to do what they did. So they redid the special effects. So all the planet shots where they're going around the Earth or other planets or whatever were all redone. They redid the special effects. Well, there are several episodes of the old 1960 Star Trek where they went back in time or whatnot, or found another planet that looked exactly like Earth, and they used that same Earth. And the way you could tell it is there's a cloud formation right there. It's like a backwards C. It's like a backwards C just off the East Coast. And that is a separate layer in the 3D model. So that it's not always over the East Coast of the United States. You'll see it in other places. But look for that backward C because it shows up all over the place. So it makes me wonder, was NASA created to hide God? Now, I've seen this meme being passed around on Facebook and other places that the Hebrew word NASA means to deceive. Yes and no. Like the letter shin in the middle, I don't know if you can see it from where you are, it has a little dot over the right side of the shin. That depending on where that dot is, depends on how you pronounce the word. You got the nun, shin, and aleph right there. When it's over the right side, it's pronounced more like nasha. It's pronounced with a sh sound. When the dot is over the left, it's with a s sound. The first time it appears in our scriptures is in Genesis 3, when the serpent beguiled me. Nasha. Same word, just pronounced slightly different. The second time it shows up is when Cain receives his judgment, and it says it's more than I can bear in Genesis 4:13, and that's when the dot is over the left side. And so that's when it's pronounced NASA or NASA. So how interesting, the context in which both first appear, Nasha in reference to Eve being deceived by the serpent, and NASA in reference to Cain's punishment after killing his brother Abel. The word in that case, it's translated there as bear, but it also means to lift up. So I'm going, lifting up to deceive? Maybe. Oh, don't be silly. You can trust us. If that's true, what's the motivation? That's what I always hear. Why would they lie? What's the motivation, Rob? Well, this is just my thoughts on it. First, get people to doubt Yahuwah's word by destroying the very foundation of our Bible, Genesis, specifically the creation account. Second, set up a new paradigm where God is out and science is in. Evolution removes Yahuwah from the equation. When evolution finally runs its course and becomes utterly bankrupt, introduce the idea of intelligent design, but deny the true designer his due credit, and place it rather on ancient aliens. 4, promote the ancient alien theme as much as possible in all forms of media by perpetuating the concept of Earth as a tiny blue marble, insignificant blue marble, by the way, orbiting an average sun in an average galaxy among trillions of other galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. With so much potential for life to exist in such a vast expanse, the idea of ancient aliens or ancient scientists, alien scientists, being our creators seems a lot more plausible over time and heavy indoctrination. The stage is set for our alien creators to return and bestow upon us their miraculous signs and wonders in order to convince us all the more that all religions are false. We then put our trust in them. Finally, when Christ does return, we are all convinced that he is the enemy and our united world gathers together to make war with him. That's just my thoughts on it. About what, if there is a grand conspiracy, what would the motivation be? Those are my thoughts on that. So let's tie it all together now. Tying it all together, a most peculiar timeline. So we have God creates the world in 6 literal days, describing essentially a snow globe enclosed world cosmology. Shortly after Adam and Eve are placed in the Garden of Eden, a serpent deceives them into disobeying Yahuwah, and a seed war begins. Cain kills his brother Abel. Seth replaces Abel, and the messianic seed is to come from his line. Plan B, corrupt the seed line. The Genesis 6 experiment occurs. Over a 1,200-year time period, all flesh becomes corrupted through various forms of Nephilim hybridization. Yahuwah destroys the whole world with a flood, preserving only those who made it onto Noah's ark. The whole earth is populated by Noah's 3 sons. In 1908 AM, or a year since creation, Nimrod is born. Abram is born in 1948 AM, and the seed war continues with 2 human players on the cosmic chessboard, Nimrod versus Abraham. Nimrod builds a tower in order to reach into heaven and ultimately attempts to kill Yahuwah. His plan fails when Yahuwah confounds the languages. People disperse, all talking about the same guy, Nimrod, and now only with different languages, different names. Hence, he becomes the rebellious god of this world. Abraham produces Isaac, who produces Jacob, who is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. The stage is now set for the entire biblical narrative. All of that's within the first 12 chapters of Genesis, which ultimately leads to Messiah and his final victory in the cosmic seed war. Now let's drill down to more along our timeline. Nimrod, again, was born in 1908 AM, year since creation. Just so happens to be, if you flash forward to 1908 AD, Ernest Shackleton boarded a ship called the Nimrod, and he heads down to Antarctica on the Nimrod expedition. Now, in the biblical account, Nimrod went up to try to get into the firmament. In 1908, if this model is true, it looks like they went out to get to the firmament towards the outer regions. Now, people are like, well, if it's flat Earth, how come we don't fall off the edge? Well, because it just so happens to be, if you Google coastline of Antarctica, you see 200 to 300 foot ice walls. That would be the outside of the circle, so to speak. If you look into the Enochian account of what happened to, what happened to him when Enoch was not, for God took him, where did he take him? Joshua says he was taken in a place of snow and ice. So I'm going, okay, that's interesting. So Nimrod heads down to, Shackleton heads down on the Nimrod expedition. Many more Antarctic expeditions soon follow. In 1931, a guy named Auguste Piccard, who was a scientist, shoots himself up into the stratosphere. He got to nearly 52,000 feet, first guy to get that high, in a metal ball hanging from a balloon, and comes back describing, for Popular Science magazine no less, the Earth as a flat disk with upturned edges. That was his description of what he saw. During World War II, the Nazis become obsessed with the occult and Antarctica. Just look into the Nazis and what they were doing down there. After World War II, the rest of the world suddenly becomes obsessed with Antarctica as well. Enter Admiral Byrd. He's an interesting character who allegedly flew to the North Pole region in the late 1940s, and he came back claiming to have found the entrance to Inner Earth, Agartha. Now, this is a highly decorated, he's the youngest admiral in the U.S. military. Comes back talking about this in his diaries. The Babylon Working I told you about earlier takes place in 1946, along with L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. JPL founder Jack Parsons, who was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, engages in ritualistic sex magic in order to incarnate a moon child with the Scarlet Woman named Babylon. Byrd then goes to Antarctica, leading Operation High Jump in 1947. Why is it called Operation High Jump? Well, you got to jump up. You got to get over that big ice wall there. What else happened in 1947? Lots of interesting things happened in 1947. Among them, the founding of the International Monetary Fund, the start of Jewish immigration to the land of Israel. A young Bedouin shepherd discovers the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's when he chucks a rock in there, here's a crack, goes in there, finds the scrolls. And then we have the alleged UFO crash near Roswell, New Mexico, all happening at that same time period. A nation calling itself Israel is established in 1948. MK Ultra begins early in the 1950s, officially runs from 1953 to 1973, coincidentally the same time as the space program. If you know anything about MK Ultra, that's all about government-sponsored mind control. In fact, if you go back to the press conference, you see those three guys from Apollo 11 looking very depressed, and then Neil Armstrong says, and now he says something to the effect of, now we'll view the slides from our mission so that we can reacquaint ourselves with what happened. Look, if I just went to the moon, I would have remembered every detail of every second of everything I did forever. I don't need slides to tell me what I did, And when the slideshow comes on, all of a sudden these guys who are so like just bummed out, it looked like, become very animated and start like, woo. It was almost as if they were triggered in MK Ultra.
The flight, as you know, started promptly. And I think that was characteristic of all the events of the flight. The Saturn gave us one magnificent ride, both into Earth orbit and on a trajectory to the moon. Our memory of that actually differs little from the reports that you have all heard from those previous Saturn V flights, and the previous flights served us well in preparation for this flight in the boost as well as the subsequent phases. We would like to skip directly to the translunar coast phase and remind ourselves of the chain of events, long chain of events that actually permitted a landing, starting with the undockings, the transposition and docking sequence. In the final phases of descent after a number of program alarms. We looked at the landing area and found a very large crater just in the very left top corner of the picture. The camera is located in the right window and looks to the right, and it just barely sees this boulder field we're passing over right now. We're at 400 feet and those boulders are about 10 feet across. This was the area which we decided we would not go into, extended the range downrange, and saw this crater, which we passed over, this 80-foot crater, in the final phases of descent and later took some pictures of.
Is it a coincidence that MK Ultra was going through its height of its program at the same time as the Apollo program? I don't think so. Operation Deep Freeze takes place in Antarctica 1955 through 56. Sputnik is launched in late 1957. Both NASA and DARPA are formed in 1958. DARPA is the Defense Agency's research projects. That's where they do all the black budget projects to create super soldiers and all kinds of other things. DARPA and NASA created the same year. This is like after Operation Deep Freeze, all these people go down to Antarctica and then something happens. Everybody pulls out of there and they decide they have to set up the Antarctic Treaty. And the treaty was finally signed into effect in '61. The treaty says you can only go there under the express guidelines of this treaty. So yeah, you can go there. There's some flat earthers saying you can't go there. That's not true. You can go there, but only under the express guidelines of the treaty, which means you can't just go, take a boat, go there and just go exploring Antarctica. You're going to go only where you're allowed to go. And so all of this it's setting up a very interesting timeline. At least, if you're wearing a tinfoil hat like I am, it's all kind of going, whoa, wait a minute. This is really kind of wild here. And it gets worse when you get to Operation Dominic and Project Fishbowl, where they launched 31 nukes in 1962. Many of them were high-altitude nukes. Operation Fishbowl. Kennedy's speech, 1962, kicks off the space race leading to Apollo. Star Trek debuts in 1966 and goes right through 69. Apollo 11 allegedly lands on the moon in 1969. In 1972, coincidentally, just before MK Ultra officially terminated. And the Omega Plan kicks in shortly thereafter. I'm not going to go into the Omega Plan. I've got a 20-minute video on YouTube if you want to check that out. That describes what I consider to be the end times plan in great detail. Now, the next video you're going to see is a video that I put together after I discovered what was really going on with Operation Fishbowl.
Now, with the tinfoil hat on, playing conspiracy theory here, the flat earthers are claiming, and I think it's a reasonable claim, that if that model is true, then we know we have a circle, the circle of the earth as described in the Bible, surrounded by Antarctica, the outer rim, that has a 200 or 300 foot ice wall, cliff, that keeps everything in, hence Operation High Jump. You got to get over that, right? So it looks like, at least from the flat earther perspective, that probably during Operation Deep Freeze, they may have found the edge of the dome, presumably anywhere from 800 to 1,200 miles inland from the coast. Then everybody pulls out, signs this treaty, says nobody can go back except under the express guidelines of the international community that signed the treaty. So then all of a sudden the United States and Russia engaged in these high altitude nuclear tests, and the United States calls theirs Operation Dominic, within which we have Operation Fishbowl. Now, hold that thought. This is all happening. If you go and look on the Operation Dominic entry, you see the different dates. We're 1962. This is the early part of 1962. We're talking May. I mean, look at all these bombs going off. 25 April, 1962, 27 April, 2 May, 4 May, 6 May, 8 May, 9 May, 11 May, 11 May, 12 May, 14 May, 19, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all before President Kennedy's "Let's go out in the space" speech. But I think a lot of people don't realize that our first stop wasn't the moon. Even before we went to the moon, they were sending probes all of a sudden after all of this. Okay, keep the timeline in mind. Operation High Jump, Operation Deep Freeze, Bird dies, NASA's founded, Antarctic Treaty signed, Operation Dominic and Fishbowl take effect. And if you notice during President Kennedy's speech, he was talking about that they've already got probes headed to Venus. Wait a minute. We're already sending stuff to Venus and Mars? We haven't even been to the moon yet. And so I was looking into that, and on planetary.org/explore/space topics/space missions to Venus-Mercury.html. And you can go through this site. It starts sort of from the bottom up. As early as February 4th, 1961, they're sending a probe, Sputnik 7. Russia sent this probe to check out Venus. The final stage of the rocket carrying Sputnik 7 into orbit failed, and the spacecraft was unable to achieve the necessary trajectory to carry it onto Venus. Then Venera 1, Russia, sends out another probe February 12, 1961. They lost communications while it was on its way to Venus. Then NASA sends up Mariner 1, July 22nd, 1962. Now, that's right in the middle of Dominic and Fishbowl, that we sent out a probe to go check out Venus. It veered off course and was destroyed by ground controllers. So then Russia sends up another one, Sputnik 19, August 25th, 1962. The spacecraft made it into orbit, but the rocket's last stage failed, and Sputnik 19 was unable to achieve its Venus trajectory and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere 3 days later. NASA, August 27th, 1962, sends its probe. It says Mariner 2 was the first spacecraft to successfully fly by Venus at an altitude of 34,773 kilometers. The spacecraft discovered ground temperatures, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is during the time period that between August 27th, 1962 and December 14th, 1962, that we had President Kennedy's speech in September, on September 12th, 1962. So that's what he's referring to. You know, we've already got stuff out there, and you can read about the other ones that were, you know, checking out Venus, I guess Mercury also, and attempted probes going to Mars. Now, this is all before we've even been to the moon. So it appears that whatever happened in Antarctica, everybody got kind of maybe nervous or excited or whatever and said, okay, what is the deal? You know, we've looked through telescopes. We've seen our so-called neighbors, Venus and Mars, through telescopes. Our assumption is the solar system is, you know, set up in the Copernican model. And, but yet maybe they found a dome and they started to question all that. So the first thing they do is send out probes to go, wait a minute, what in the world? If we're in a dome, how high does this thing go? So they start launching high altitude nuclear bombs. And if you look at the videos on Operation Fishbowl and Starfish Prime and all those high altitude tests, I mean, it looks like they're hitting something up there. I mean, at least from a conspiratorial tinfoil hat wearing perspective, that's what it looks like. Now, this is what blew my mind. You can read more on all that if you'd like. To get caught up to speed on what's going on there. So I go to Lubbock, and I'm doing this conference out there at Jared Cressman's father's church, Pastor Dan Cressman, and we get to talking about this whole issue of the flat Earth stuff. And he goes, "Do you know what the name Dominic means?" And I said, "No." He says, "You know, you talk about Operation Fishbowl, but check this out. I'm going to take you to, I'll put the screen share back up here. Take you to a one of those name websites. I like using behindthename.com. Look up the name Dominic. And again, let's just double check it here. Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. Look up Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. From the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high altitude nuclear bombs to test the fishbowl of the Lord, i.e., the firmament. Yeah, this is definitely one of those things to make you go,
He says we already have probes on the way to Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars, 62. We didn't even allegedly go to the moon until 69. The moon is allegedly 250,000 miles away. Venus and Mars, they're way past that. We had just, as human beings, we had just basically put a beach ball up in space. Sputnik. You know, you look at that, ooh, that was like a huge major achievement in 57. And all of a sudden by 61, 62, we supposedly have probes on the way to Venus and Mars, and we haven't even been to the moon yet? And if you listen to the speech, he mentions it, but it's just kind of just, you don't even think about it. But I went on a NASA website, or a space website, whatever it was their official mission log, and it shows you. These are all the things that both the United States and Russia, immediately, after whatever they did in Antarctica, the first thing they do is start sending stuff out to Venus and Mars and start sending high-altitude nuclear bombs up into the sky. Again, if they're trying to avoid a conspiracy, they're not helping with their actions or the names that they're using. So, in my opinion, the stage is set for the return of the gods. Have the Watchers been released? Remember I told you they were bound up for 70 generations? That's from Enoch 10:12 right there. They'll be bound for 70 generations. We were talking about generations earlier. Psalm 90 defines it as a generation of 70 years, 80 if by strength. If we just take the low number there, 70 times 70, it's 4,900 years. 4,900 years away from 3000 BC, which is when I showed you the time of the Watchers being judged, bound, and buried. 4,900 years from 3000 BC brings you up to the beginning of the 20th century. Is it just a coincidence that we went from horse and buggy and beast of burden, basically, for 5,000 years, to all of a sudden planes, trains, automobiles, computers, supposedly sending people to the moon, probes to the farthest reaches of space, all of that in like 50 years? Or did we get some help? Maybe due to all the blood sacrifices of 2 world wars. How many know demons thrive on blood sacrifice? That's why they do it. You know, I put this chart together, and I'm looking at Daniel 12:4, talking about knowledge increasing and things of that nature, and showing knowledge and transportation. And, you know, at the Tower of Babel, whatever pre-flood knowledge existed took a huge hit at the Tower of Babel. Because people who may have been like extremely intelligent together were now barely understanding each other and had to go out try to figure out their own languages. And, you know, sorry, you know, if you had Tesla in your group, that's great. But, you know, if you got Pee Wee Herman in yours, you know, yeah, I'm going to carve pictures in the caves. You know, knowledge took a nosedive, and that was God's plan. It was like, okay, with all this knowledge that you have, this is what you're going to do. You're going to come after me? Fine. I'm going to mess it all up. So knowledge and everything takes a nosedive at the Tower of Babel. And then you have a few peaks and stuff throughout various civilizations. But it kind of plateaus there as far as transportation and things of that nature until you get to the beginning of the 20th century, and then it goes through the roof. You have the Amelantra workings taking place in March of 1918. Famed occultist Aleister Crowley began a series of magical experiments called the Amelantra workings, in which he is said to have opened a portal to another dimension, allowing an entity, or I would say a demon, named Lamb to enter through it. This is the picture that he drew of that entity in 1918. It's awfully similar to what we would say in pop culture today, alien gray, 1918. His disciple, Jack Parsons, now with the Amelantra working, supposedly Crowley had figured out how to open dimensional portals to allow these entities in and to close them, according to the literature. Supposedly Crowley's portal was further enlarged by Jet Propulsion Laboratory founder and rocket fuel scientist Jack Parsons and Scientology and Dianetics founder L. Ron Hubbard in March of 1946 at a location that later became known as Area 51. Their experiment was called the Babylon Working. Like the Amelantra working, it was based on ceremonial sex magic. Unlike Crowley, however, they were not as adept at opening and closing portals. Theirs apparently stayed open, and the modern UFO era began 1 year later in 1947, the same year Crowley died. Now here's another clip regarding alien abductions.
Modern accounts of sexual encounters with aliens date back to 1957, when a Brazilian farmer claimed he was taken on board a ship and coerced into having sex with a strange-looking blonde female with large eyes.
One of the most famous and earliest of the modern extraterrestrial abduction reports is the 1957 case of Antonio Villas-Boas in Brazil. And he claimed that a flying saucer landed in his remote farm, He was taken aboard. While he was there, he had a sexual encounter with this extraterrestrial woman.
That's one of the first abduction cases, and most interesting because it preceded all the others and wasn't well known until years afterwards. So you can't say that Antonio Villas-Boas got these ideas by reading pulp literature.
A few years later, in 1961, Betty and Barney Hill of Lancaster, New Hampshire, reported a famous abduction incident where they were placed naked on examination tables and probed by what they described as gray aliens who extracted eggs and sperm samples.
Now, this is a field of research that I actually kind of got started with, looking into the whole UFO alien thing, because from a biblical worldview, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. What is this? You can't deny this stuff is happening. This is happening more and more. In fact, a friend of mine who just graduated from seminary was thinking about starting his own Bible school, had watched the first season of Ancient Aliens, and he said, Rob, I know you're into this kind of out there weird research and stuff. He's like, what do we, as Bible-believing Christians, what do we do with this evidence? We can deny the conclusions that they come up with. What do we do what are we supposed to do with the evidence? We can't deny the evidence. The evidence is there. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I mean, here's a guy who just graduated seminary. He's about to start his own Bible school, and he doesn't have an answer for this. You know, so at that time, I actually started having Ancient Aliens night. I had a studio, and I would just open it up to the public, and we'd come in and watch Ancient Aliens episodes, and then I'd talk about it from a biblical worldview. That's really kind of how I got started. Are you going to hear anything about this in church? You're hearing it every day in the world. The world is hearing it every day. It's being pushed on them through television, cartoons, movies, everywhere you look. And now even into quote unquote mainstream science with Richard Dawkins and people like that saying, it could be, Ancient Aliens seeded the world. If the church isn't talking about it, the church is going to be in a whole lot of trouble. Because something's coming. You know, I believe it's all part of a great deception. And I begin to wonder if that's not part of the fulfillment of Daniel 2:43, where it says, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they, who are they, shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, and they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. You have this mysterious they mixing themselves with humans. What's going on there? I don't know, but we see with all these alien abduction things, and more of them are happening. Dr. David Jacobs is a guy who started out as a skeptic, but just ended up counseling people who claimed to have been abducted, and they would tell him his story, and it's like, okay, you hear it once, okay, maybe, the dude's crazy. You hear it twice, well, that's an interesting coincidence. You keep hearing it over and over and over again, dozens of people from all around the world telling similar stories that have no interaction with each other, then you got to take notice of it and say something's happening here. And when people are seeing UFO sightings more and more increasing every year, stuff happening, signs, wonders in the sky, it all just feeds into it. And I'm going, again, is it just a coincidence that books like this start popping up right around the same time? And you got the Roswell thing happening in 47, but you also have that dude throwing a rock in a cave, and out pops the Book of Enoch and other texts that help to explain. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's there to help us to, my people perish for lack of knowledge. I say, well, great. What if we get educated? Is the stage being set for a return of the Nephilim? Well, I showed this diagram before. I believe that the Nephilim that we were dealing with at the time of the flood were created by humans through genetic manipulation, blending species and things of that nature. And I like to point out that the days of Jared versus the days of Noah, it says in the days of Noah, Yeshua said, the last days would be like. The days of Jared were marked by the mating of angels and humans, whereas the days of Noah is marked by the creation of animal-human hybridization that led to the corrupting of all flesh. So if I'm to take his words literally in Matthew 24:37, all we need to do is turn on the evening news. We're seeing it over and over again, the blending of species. We see transhumanism, I call it the doctrine of devils, basically setting itself up right in line with what you see in Genesis chapter 3. Where the serpent says, you shall be as gods. You see in the promises of the serpent, three things: a promise of immortality, a promise that your eyes will be open, you have knowledge and understanding, and you shall be as gods. There's a guy by the name of Professor Nick Bostrom. He's one of the foremost spokespersons out there for transhumanism. Listen to what he says. Keep those three in mind. Listen to what Professor Nick Bostrom says.
What I'm really interested in is to try to understand the bigger picture for humanity, our place in the world, and what might lie in store for our species in the future, particularly the way we might use technologies to enhance ourselves or to go beyond what we currently think of as our human nature, whether it might be by radically extending the human lifespan through solving the problem of aging, or increasing our intellectual capacities, improving our memory, or taking control of our own emotional states. I think that we are right now in a transitional phase where before the end of this century we will either have gone extinct, or we will have most likely taken the step to become what you might call transhumans or posthumans, or just very enhanced humans that have reached their full potential.
The same three promises in the same order.
Wow.
Professor Nick Bostrom. You go to his website, and he's got a graphic here that shows what their plans are. He says the little pink circle there in the left, in the right corner, is the sensory modalities that's available to humans. What we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, that's what's available to us. The large gray area, elongated there, is what's accessible to animals. We know that, bats can have radar and sonar with dolphin, and, different species of animals have different abilities than humans. So that's what's available to the animal kingdom. He says, but if we could blend animals and humans, then we might end up with the sensory abilities of this larger orange circle right here. What kid doesn't want to be Wolverine, right? We're having that stuff put in our face all the time. We think it's cool and it's entertaining and all that stuff, but people are seriously considering this stuff, especially in black budget projects from DARPA and other things. They're very much concerned with creating super soldiers and things of that nature. And he says, if we keep messing around and doing that stuff, we might end up with a very big yellow one there, and we'll be post-humans. We can blend ourselves with machines and stuff, Terminator, all that kind of good stuff. This is what's happening. Okay? We can choose to ignore it, pretend it's not there. That's what's happening in the world today. And here's a clip, just a little bit about hybridization. And this is from a number of years ago. Way more has happened since I originally put this together.
Plans to allow scientists to create embryos that are part human and part animal are set for approval by the official regulator in Britain. These hybrid embryos are seen by the country's leading scientists as a vital step in the search for cures for diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. It's a highly controversial procedure and is banned in some European countries. Our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh has the story.
This embryo is part mouse, part cow. In a few months, this Newcastle lab is hoping to create a human-cow hybrid. This is highly complex science, the creation of cytoplasmic hybrids, known as cybrid embryos. The starting point is a cow's egg, which is cut open by a laser. The DNA is sucked out. The next step is to take a human cell, perhaps from a patient with Parkinson's disease, and inject it into the egg. Now this is the crucial point at which an embryo is created, because by using an electric shock, the hybrid embryo starts growing, the cells subdividing. In reality, it's smaller than a pinhead, and when it's just 6 days old, the embryo shell is broken open. Inside are stem cells, the body's master cells. The ultimate aim is to reprogram them into any tissue in the body. For example, nerve cells, heart cells, or brain cells.
CRISPR is even worse. CRISPR is a newer technology. Look in the CRISPR technology. Okay, that's what's happening. That's what's in our day. And, I was looking into all this at that time, and I saw two books that I had on my bookshelf, or sitting on my desk actually, arranged in this order. Corrupting the Image by Doug Hamp, and Forbidden Gates by Tom and Nita Horn. And I was looking at they're arranged in that order. I said, wow, what if that's the formula? Corrupting the image that God created and called good of each kind leads to opening up forbidden gates that brings about the recreation or the return of the Nephilim. I believe that's exactly what's happening, especially if you look in the definition of what the fall, that's where Nephilim comes from, and just look at all that. No good's going to come from that. And this is why, you're going to have to make your own decisions, but it's getting scarier and scarier to go to hospitals for anything, short of setting a broken bone or something maybe. Because as soon as they start getting into genetic stuff and vaccines and things of that nature, especially if you're trying to walk in Torah, you know, I'm of the opinion that we're going to have to really start to walk in and understand what Scripture says. Anyone, not just Peter, James, and John, anyone who believes in me will do the same works that I've done and even greater works. I think we're going to have to get that. And, you know, Steve talked about being part of the Pentecostal movement and stuff, and, you know, and I've been associated with some of that too. And I've actually seen people get healed. I've seen people being healed through these hands right here, not because of who I am, but because of who lives inside of me. And I know enough about myself that if I have a half a second to think about it, it's not going to work. But I've had those times where I've been in a situation and God will just tap me on the shoulder and say, heal her. And that's happened a number of times. The times that I think about it and yeah, but what if it doesn't work? And people are going to, you know, forget it. Doubt is the kryptonite of faith. But the times that I just said, okay, yes, Lord, boom. And it wasn't about praying, oh, Lord, please, if it's your will, please. No. Where do you see people doing that in the Bible? You see Peter seeing a dude there say, look, silver and gold I don't have, but what I do have, get up and walk. You know, command that thing to go. And it goes. And I've seen that happen. So I believe in it. Have I been able to walk in it, you know, steadily? No. Absolutely not. But I desire to. And I think a day's coming where we're going to need to. Because it is getting scary out there. And not just on that side. I mean, corrupting all flesh, you have the combining of species, but you also have the merging with technology. And you got Time Magazine putting out a front cover right there, 2045, the year man becomes immortal. That's their goal. And if you go to 2045.com and read about the Strategic 2045 Social Initiative, you'll see that these people get together every year. Some of the brightest minds in the world get together and discuss technologies and things to get us toward that goal. Amen. And it's all about transhumanism. Amen. Blending of species and technologies and cyborgs and stuff. Amen. Which is really interesting when you see a clip like this that was by a U.S. Army general addressing his some cadets that were in an Army school.
If the world of 1916 was complex, or the world of 1945 was complex, the world of 2016 is intensely complex. And I can tell you that from personal experience, and I know there's many others who can tell you that as well. And you will graduate and be in that world, and you're going to be leading the soldiers and the sailors, the airmen and the Marines in that world. You'll be dealing with terrorists. You'll be dealing with hybrid armies. You'll be dealing with little green men. You're going to be dealing with tribes. You'll be dealing with national leaders and local leaders. You'll be dealing with politics and economics. And you'll be dealing with direct fire and indirect fire. And you're going to be dealing with it all. And it's all going to be dealt with simultaneously.
Now, of course, the official take on that is hybrid armies is talking about standard military operations combined with technology, drones, and different things like that. That's sort of the official view of what hybrid army represents. You know, a hybrid of all kinds of different methods. Little green men happens to be a reference, they say, to 6-foot-tall Russian soldiers that have unmarked green uniforms. That's the official story. And that may be true. Sure, great, wonderful. What about all this other stuff that I showed you that is really happening? They are really creating hybrids in laboratories, and all of the ancient history says that you're going to end up with ultimate violence if you do that. And little green men, if I ever said to you the phrase little green men, what's the first thing you think of? Martians. Where's the kaboom? The earth-shattering kaboom. Little green men is a reference to aliens in pop culture. And we have a massive increase in UFO sightings and alien abductions. So he may be saying more truth than most people are willing to accept. Is the stage being set for the return of the beast? I'm going to conclude with this. You know, I talked about the return of the Watchers that were judged, bound, and buried for 70 generations. Is it just a coincidence that what happened in the 20th century? The return of the Nephilim, is it just a coincidence that we're seeing the hybridization taking place? Well, what about the return of the beast? We're expecting the return of Christ. I believe that there's going to be a return of Antichrist as well. If you remember the names that I had up there, Osiris being one of the references to Nimrod, one of the names he became known by. Well, the tomb of Osiris was found in 1999. Dr. Zahi Hawass said, I have found a shaft going 29 meters vertically down into the ground, exactly halfway between the Chevron pyramid and the Sphinx. At the bottom, which is filled with water, we have found a burial chamber with 4 pillars. In the middle is a large granite sarcophagus, which I expect to be the grave of Osiris, the god. I've been digging in Egypt's sand for more than 30 years, and up to date, this is the most exciting discovery I have made. This is what they found when they looked at it. This is an artist's rendering of it. The red star is the location between the pyramid and the Sphinx. And then you came down into a large chamber, went down again, came down to an area that had 7 sarcophagus things, and another tunnel that went down even further, actually 6, with a 7th one going down. And then you have the artist depiction on the right there of what they found. Now, the sarcophagus was open. They did find a body inside of it. Everybody that looked at it and studied it did not believe that it was Osiris, but they were thinking that this may be what we might consider to be a resurrection chamber. And so what it appears is that somebody, maybe with the hopes of being resurrected, was loaded into this thing and it didn't work. But it's a very interesting find. You can look that up, study that for yourself. And in 2003, April 2003, coincidentally 1 month before we set up the military occupation phase in Iraq, and the first thing our troops did was raid the Museum of Iraq, and 170,000 items were reported stolen. Of those, most of them were returned. The ones that were not returned were about 3,000 items that all dealt with resurrection and the afterlife. Probably just a coincidence. That's right after they found the tomb of Gilgamesh. And if the stories are to be believed, the body was found, believed to be Gilgamesh, incredibly well preserved, and the primary objective was to extract DNA. So then we get to a warning from Yeshua in Matthew 24. He says, if any man say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. He says, behold, I have told you before. That's King James. Other translations make it sound like, hey, listen up. I'm about to tell you something. Remember what I've told you before? Think about it. If they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert. The body of Gilgamesh was pulled out of the desert in 2003. Go not forth. Behold, he's in the secret chambers. The secret chamber of Osiris was found in 1999. Believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. That's what we should be looking for. Those are the real signs. Any other signs pointing to a Christ, forget about it. This is what you need to pay attention to. And then he says, for wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. And I think Steve said, rightly so, there are many different ways people have looked at these passages. Lots of different interpretations. Here's one of mine. When you look into what the occult believes, and again, the Freemasons and the Illuminati and all the secret societies and stuff, the rituals are all revolved around a dying and resurrecting character. In many cases, directly associated with Osiris. And Manly P. Hall is one of the most prolific writers of Freemasonry, said, whenever you see an eagle with a point on the back of its head, it's not really an eagle. It's a stylized, conventionalized phoenix. The phoenix is the Benu. It's the dying and resurrecting soul bird of Osiris in the mythology. So I'm at the train station in Washington, D.C., and if you go there and you look up, you'll see the whole top of the train station is lined with pagan gods. There's one that I didn't put in here, but on the left side, the quote sounds like, sounds like a biblical thing. It says, behold, I put all things under his feet. But it's a Zeus. That's not what my scriptures say, but you look at the stuff, and that's on the left. When you go to the right, you see this right here. You see 2 pointy-headed eagles facing in opposite directions, and it says, between them, let all the ends thou aimst at be, thy countries, thy gods, and truths be noble, and the nobleness that lies in other men, sleeping but never dead, will rise in majesty to meet thine own. What is that all about? Well, I got 2 phoenix eagles right there. I was thinking about my time in the military. When I was in the Army, I was covered from head to toe with eagles. Eagles on our buttons, eagles on our patches, eagles on our shoes. Like eagles are everywhere, the American eagle. But, Manly P. Hall says there's another meaning behind that. And so while we were looking at all this stuff, there was something that I wanted to see, and I didn't know where it was. And we're driving down the road, and I looked between 2 buildings, and I saw 2 eagles perched atop pillars, one on each pillar, through this aisleway. I said, I don't know what that is, but let's go check it out. So I go down there, and this is what we find. A statue. This is in the National Harbor in Washington, D.C. a statue of a bearded god coming up out of the National Harbor. And the name of the statue is called the Awakening, which is right underneath the statue of two eagles looking down on it. I don't know, you know, but this stuff is out there. And you got people, again, like Manly P. Hall saying, the dying God shall rise again. The secret room in the house of the hidden places shall be rediscovered. The pyramid, again, shall stand as the ideal emblem of solidarity, inspiration, aspiration, resurrection, and regeneration. This is in The Secret Teaching of All Ages, Manly P. Hall, page 44. We need to know our enemy. I showed a lot of stuff. I'm sorry it went long. I'm hoping that I'm equipping you with at least some things to go look into for yourselves. Because if we're to declare the end from the beginning, then I believe everything we need to know about the last days is given from us in the beginning days. If we want to have any understanding of Revelation, we got to go back to Genesis and work our way forward from there. Thank you.